Calling this hearing to order. For the record, my name is Kenzie Bach. I'm the District 8 City Councilor and also the Chair of the Council's Committee on City Services and Innovation Technology. This hearing is being recorded. It is being live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-tv and broadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and FiOS Channel 964. You can send written comments on this hearing to the committee email at ccc.csit@boston.gov. Those will be made part of the record and available to all councilors. But if you're here with us in person, you can testify at the end of this hearing. There is a sign up in the corner by the door, so please sign up there. And if you are watching and you want to testify virtually, please email Shane Pack, that's at shane.pac@boston.gov, and Shane will get you the link and we'll add your name to the list for virtual testimony. Today's hearing is on docket 0145, order for a hearing to discuss the safety of light poles, bridges, and other public infrastructure in the city of Boston. And I'm joined here today by my colleagues, the sponsors of this matter, so Council President Ed Flynn from District 2 and Councilor Michael Flaherty at large. I'm also joined by Councilor Aaron Murphy at large and Councilor Rusi Louis-Jen at large. So thank you to all the colleagues for being here. We'll be hearing in a moment, if we can just get the doors. We'll be hearing in a moment from our Chief of Streets for the City of Boston, Yasha Franklin Hodge, and Michael Donahue, the Superintendent of Street Lighting for the Department of Public Works. And we've also got Para, whose title is not on my list, but our illustrious city engineer. But before we go to the panel, I'll just give my colleagues an opportunity to say a brief word of opening statement, starting first with President Flynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the administration officials that are here with us this afternoon. Also, thank you to my colleague, Councilor Flaherty, for sponsoring this with me. Thank you to my other colleagues for being here as well, Councilor Murphy and Councilor Louis-Jen. Again, thank you, Councilor Bach. As you know, there was an accident last September where a pedestrian was injured by a falling light pole while she was crossing the Evelyn Moakley Bridge in the South Boston waterfront, which is in my district, District 2. After the incident, I asked Boston Public Works to inspect all city bridges in the area. And this inspection took place, and I believe 23 of the light poles that were deemed not completely satisfactory, with 2 additional light poles already removed previously under different circumstances. It was also reported that this site, which is the Evelyn Moakley Bridge, was inspected on January 19th, 2022, and the Massachusetts Department of Transportation report coded the lighting standard 5 out of 9, or fair. However, this report also indicates that the pole was marked in the categories of deficiencies as S, or severe major deficiency, in the urgency of repair category as A for ASAP, or action repair should be initiated by the district maintenance engineer or the responsible party, if not a state-owned bridge, upon receipt of the inspection report. This incident illustrates the need to ensure that our light poles, bridges, and other public infrastructures are safe and stable for our residents and visitors, especially as harsh weather, sea, air, salt water can deteriorate the city's infrastructure. I know this issue very well, having served 25 years in the U.S. Navy, and I've seen this take place across the country and really across many ports and across the world. As a coastal city with many bridges and as a city with harsh New England weather, light poles and public infrastructure get corroded by salt water and the elements, and we need to ensure that they are safe, especially those that are in close proximity to the ocean. We're in the budget process now, and I'd really like to know what funding we are requesting to address this issue. So Council Flaherty and I filed this hearing last year and again this year to discuss the safety of light poles, bridges, and public infrastructure. It is critical that the city continues to ensure that our city's public infrastructure is safe, structurally sound, and that there are routine inspections and systems in place for maintenance and repair. It's also important that we work with city, state, and federal officials as well. It's critically important that the city be diligent in inspecting all of its light poles, bridges, public infrastructure to make any necessary repairs in a timely manner, in working to the best of our ability, again, with our state partners, our federal partners. Madam Chair, looking forward to this hearing, looking forward to the testimony from the administration team on how we can work together to ensure this doesn't happen again. But also, I think we need to discuss what are the lessons learned from this. After every incident that I've been part of in the military, we always have an after-action report. We discuss it, and we learn about best practices. We learn about the things that we did well, but we also learn about the things that we can improve. So I hope that we can have that discussion here today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Councillor Flynn. Councillor Flaherty?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And in the same line of thought on that, it's obviously good to see our chief and superintendent and our city engineer. The last whereas kind of sums it up for me. It's critical that the city be diligent in inspecting all of its light poles, bridges, and public infrastructure to make any necessary repairs in a timely manner and to work to the best of our ability with our state and federal partners to ensure that incidents like this do not happen again. So for me, that sort of, it's what the crux of this hearing. I also know, Chief, you oversee some big departments, Public Works, Transportation, Central Fleet, and often it's, it's snow removal, it's trash collection, it's street cleaning, it's traffic management, it's the bike lane. So a lot of moving parts in your world. And for me, this hearing is obviously an opportunity for you to let us know where can we be most helpful in terms of resources and manpower to allow you to continue to do your job as chief. But also a reminder to, sometimes it's the little things, right, that oftentimes it doesn't make the news, or it's not a big snowstorm, or if it's not sort of a spring cleanup, but it's a, hey, we got to inspect that light, or that sign is, is in disrepair, or et cetera. So, and just making sure that at all levels of these different departments, Public Works, Transportation, and Central Fleet, that we're at all cylinders all the time. And it's not just about the pending big potato issue, but it's also sort of those, the sort of basic, basic city services, those basic everyday things that can turn into something, could turn into a front page story, frankly. So that's it really for me through the chair, and obviously I appreciate Council President Flynn for co-sponsoring this with me. But this is just about how we could help you and your team continue to keep your eye on the ball for all things that are big and important, but also some of the things that are everyday, somewhat mundane. But as Council Flynn had alluded to, we're a city that a significant portion is coastal. My neighborhood, obviously, Peninsula, East Boston, Charlestown, South Boston waterfront, the North End, all those areas are surrounded by salt, as well as stuff that we put down during our tough winter months, and they tend to corrode more quickly than other things. So just keeping an eye on those things so that we're making the necessary repairs in a timely manner, so that no one, our residents or visitors, or even your team, your employees, no one gets hurt out there on the job. So look forward to the hearing, and we'll continue to work with you and your departments, who all do phenomenal jobs. I mean, all of the commissioners and superintendents, that we all have a good personal working relationship. And Para, we go back, I can't even tell you, from our kids going to the Murphy School, our guys are gonna be 25 coming up soon, so it's a long time. But always been responsive, always pays attention to detail. Don't always agree all the time, but you always get the information right back as quickly as possible, as do all the other commissioners. So we're blessed to have a great team. We just got to continue to find ways to work together, identify where we kind of missed the ball a little bit, and then find out where the additional resources are needed and how we as the legislative branch can help you. So with that, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Flaherty. Councillor Murphy?
Thank you. And thank you to the sponsors for filing this hearing order. And I knew you looked familiar, that was it. I was Counselor Flaherty's his 3 children's teacher, and I would see you at the Murphy, yes. I knew there was, and that was 20-something years ago. That was a long time ago. Yes, lots of connections from the Murphy School.
You know that was Miss Murphy?
No, here I am, yeah. Yes, you can call me Erin now, you don't have to. And we were just talking about what it's like to be in a classroom full of young kids before the hearing started. No, but thank you for that, and I think that does tie into, you know, we're a small city, we bump into each other on the street, at school, at restaurants, and one of the most important roles that I see myself as an at-large counselor is connecting constituent services to our residents. And then that means that it's the relationships I have with Public Works or the Transportation Department, the Parks Department to, you know, help support when things aren't going well, or also just to be there when we're doing great things out there in the city. And then unfortunately, life, you know, tragedies happen, and sometimes that's when light is shown on something, or we then pay more attention to it. But I don't want to belittle that. I can only imagine that your department as an engineer and the head of the light, like that's something that's always on your mind, and then sometimes things do go wrong. So I know that this hearing will just, for me, it's to support, especially going into the budget season, like what do we need and what do your departments need to make sure that you can keep the upgrade going, and you can, when you see something that needs to be fixed, that your hands aren't tied, that know that we're here to support, to make sure, because we need our city to run smoothly, and we need our residents to be safe, and we need, you know, our street lights to go on. And so thank you for holding this hearing, and I'm looking forward to the conversation today, but also the, you know, partnership going forward to support. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Councilor Murphy. Councilor Louis-Jean.
Thank you to the chair, and thank you to the sponsors for bringing this matter before us. And I want to thank all of you for your incredibly hard work. It's not often I think as my at-large colleague from South Boston stated, it's not the work that's going to put you in the lights, but it's about the lights, and the lights are important, right? It's the issues that we hear about when we are at meetings, when there are unfortunate events that happen, and folks ask, well, where were the lights, or how are the lights working in the park, and how do we improve that? We know that prevention is cheaper than the cure, and that's true in healthcare, and it's true here for infrastructure. Study after study shows that waiting for a bridge to collapse is much more expensive than fortifying the bridge before it collapses. Even when it causes pain, we have examples here, like the Northern Avenue Bridge, another bridge that is not within our city jurisdiction, it's a state, but over the River Street Bridge in Hyde Park, which is causing a lot of heartache to a lot of Hyde Park residents. But whenever I explain to them, do we want to solve the problem as we can, or risk the potential, something potentially bad happening to a resident, it then makes more sense. And I know that we don't do full press packages or write-ups, or it doesn't make the Globe when we make these infrastructure improvements and make sure that things are working in good working order, but they are just important to the normal workings and mechanics of a city. We've never named a maintenance project, but maybe we should, because maybe that would make it more attractive. I'm also hoping that we can tie this into how this work is important to the city's economic development. The stronger infrastructure that you have in a city, the more you're able to do big city things and be the world-class city that we claim to be and aspire to be. And maintaining city assets in good condition is really critical. I'm also hoping that in this discussion we can talk about how we can better manage the city's register, our list of fixed maintenance, and our fixed infrastructure assets such as bridges, roads, and light poles, because it's important that we know what we have and what's under our auspices, and so that we know what we need to put dollars behind. So I thank you all for being here. Look forward to learning from the work of your cabinet. I may have to sneak away, but my team is definitely listening, and we will follow up with the sponsors. So thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Louis-Jean, Councilor Louis-Jean. And for my part, I would just say, you know, I've had the honor for the last couple of years of serving as the counselor on the Boston Common Maintenance Trust. And I think that has really underscored for me how expensive invisible work is to do, because, you know, I think we've been pouring money into fixing the drainage there, and just repaving and fixing wrought iron, and the amount of money one can spend, and sort of not have it be obvious that you've spent it is quite remarkable. And so I feel like in that little ring-fenced area, I have developed a strong sympathy for the kind of like overall topic that we're talking about today, which is how to really maintain that state of good repair, especially knowing that, as my colleagues have said, it's not necessarily always the thing that gets attention or plaudits or causes our constituents to sort of like recognize, oh, there's your city tax dollars at work, and yet we all see when we don't get to these things. So so just a super important priority, and I'm glad that Councilors Flynn and Flaherty brought this to the table today for a hearing. And with that, I'll pass things over to Chief Franklin Hodge for opening remarks.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair Bach, President Flynn, and Councilor Flaherty for calling this hearing, and Councilor Murphy and Councilor Lujan for being here. So we appreciate this opportunity to testify about the safety of our streetlights, bridges, and other public infrastructure. As noted, I'm joined by Mike Donaghy, the head of the Public Works Street Lighting Division, and Para Jayasingh, our city engineer. We also have Joe Sullivan from our street lighting team, who's here with us in the gallery. It is the primary responsibility of the Public Works Department to ensure that our assets are safe. Our teams manage more than 70,000 streetlights, 800 miles of roadway, 1,600 miles of sidewalk, 10,000 pedestrian ramps, and 40 bridges throughout Boston. The work that we do is big and small. It is everything from filling potholes, replacing signal call buttons that don't work, fixing streetlight outages, to the big things of rebuilding and replacing streets, redesigning how they function. Our goal is always to proactively identify assets in need of repair, maintenance, and in need of repair or maintenance, and to prioritize work that ultimately achieves a state of good repair. In addition to the proactive work, we also respond to issues every day, whether it's a streetlight knocked down by a driver or a 311 report of a pothole on a bridge. And while the condition of many city assets, public assets, is far from perfect, we work hard every day to inspect, maintain, repair, and upgrade structures that Boston residents rely on. The processes and tools we use to manage our assets are always evolving, and we are continuously evaluating and improving the materials and standard designs we select to ensure long life and maintainability. Most importantly, though, is the people. The people who come to work every day on behalf of the Public Works Department and the Boston Transportation Department are the backbone of our ability to manage these critical assets. And I just want to express a note of gratitude for the hard work that they put in every single day to keep the city running. Now, this hearing today, as noted, comes in the wake of a tragic incident last September that seriously injured a person crossing the Moakley Bridge. And our thoughts are with the woman who was injured, and our hope is that she is able to fully recover from those injuries. Because a claim has been filed in this incident and there is a potential for ongoing litigation, the city's Corporation Council has advised us not to speak to or answer questions about this specific incident or the history of this particular bridge. But despite that limitation, we'd be happy to answer any questions the council may have about general steps taken after this incident and our overall approach to ensuring the safety of infrastructure. We take the responsibility for that safety extremely seriously, and we know that an incident like what occurred can undermine public trust and confidence. And our goal today is to help the council and members of the public better understand how we work so that they can feel safe as they move about the city. And with that, I just want to give Mike Donaghy a chance to say a few words before we take questions from all of you.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you to President Councilor Flynn, Councilor Bach, Councilor Flaherty, Councilor Lujan, and Councilor Murphy for holding this meeting. As the head of the Street Lighting Division for the City of Boston Public Works Department, I'm proud to be the representative of Public Works employees who work hard every day to ensure that the city has safe, reliable, and efficient lighting. And I look forward to discussing with you, our work here today. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Donaghy. And Para, do you want to say anything before we?
If I can add to all that was so well said. Just to put things in context, councillors, the asset base which the chief mentioned, 800 miles of roadway, we have an asset base of a value of $6.2 billion. That's a couple of pennies. And we take it, we take great care to ensure that these assets are kept in a state of good repair. So when it comes to the bridge portfolio, I've had the privilege of serving the city in this capacity for a few years, and we are continually trying to evolve how we can achieve a state of good repair for the subset of bridges so that all our bridges are in a state of good repair by the year 2030. So we started this program back in 2015, where we supplemented the way we were doing things so that we can get to the goal line by 2030. So we have a very structured process to look at all our bridges, and that is stemming from the bridge inspection reports that we get from the state government, which is mandated by the federal government. Every 2 years, they are supposed to do an inspection. So when those inspection reports come, we take them very seriously. The equivalence is, if you go for an annual checkup with your doctor, you better listen to what they are saying. So any one of those inspection reports have close to 70 categories that, what could be challenging with a given situation. And we convey that information to consultants to take necessary and prudent action. So and we receive about 30 various types of inspection reports per year. So for the time I've been here, that's close to about 600 to 700. And we take this again very seriously, as the chief and Mike Don has said, because it's not the sort of thing we want to spotlight. And we do, again, if I can echo one thing, we take this very seriously, and we want to achieve everything to a state of good repair. But it is just not attaining a state of good repair. We need to maintain it also in a state of good repair. So want to get to a good place and then keep it in a good place so that after the year 2030, we can all be as proud as we can be about this great city we get to serve.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to go down to my colleagues for questions, starting with President Flynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, thank you to the administration team that's here tonight, and more importantly, thank you also, as Councilor Flaherty highlighted, to the men and women of the Public Works Department that do an excellent job across the city. So let me start, and I know, Chief, you mentioned that you didn't want to discuss this particular incident. So I guess I'm not going to phrase my questions on this particular incident. But let me ask some general questions. I just don't want to ask questions that you're just not able to answer. But how often do street lights, street poles, bridges, other infrastructure get inspected?
So I'll let my colleagues speak to some of the specifics of this, but generally the bridge infrastructure is inspected every 2 years. As Para mentioned, the federally mandated bridge inspection program that's administered by Mass DOT conducts every 2-year inspection. I'll let Mike speak a little bit to the approach that we take when it comes to streetlights, which do not operate under quite the same level of formal oversight and review. But I would just add before I turn it over to Mike that with all of our assets, there's a mix of different approaches that we take to how they are reviewed and inspected. We have both formalized programs. We also have city staff, trained city staff who are specialized in different domains of infrastructure who spend time in the field every day. And part of the ongoing responsibilities of our staff is to monitor and evaluate any infrastructure that they come in contact with or observe to look for indications of problems, whether that's a streetlight pole that's leaning, or a pothole in the street, or an unsafe condition on a sidewalk. It is one of the responsibilities of our field staff to always have their eyes open and be ready to report issues that they find. So that offers a sort of baseline level of oversight on much of the infrastructure. But I'll let Mike speak to some of the more specific things.
So, okay,
in street lighting.
yeah, so would you highlight light poles and bridges?
I can speak to the light poles.
Okay, bridges are every 2 years, and light poles?
Light poles are ongoing. To give you a little bit of a background, we do have a 24/5 operation, and I say it that way because we do have a weekend on-call. So within that, our department has mechanics, inspectors, and supervisory staff, and we have an engineering team as well. And so that's the staff that we have in-house to manage the 70,000 lights that we have. What we do rely upon heavily, which the chief had alluded to, was inspection throughout the city. And that is on an ad hoc basis. It is identified very clearly with some lights and can be challenging with others. But as a general comment, we're looking at all areas of the city at all times for any type of structural issues, any type of degradation issues, which might be rust, or as the chief mentioned, tilt. Certainly any hanging fixtures, we have an emergency response protocol where we'll be out there within 2 hours, and that is referenced to probably across the city travel. We can be, if we're close enough, we can be there in 15 minutes. Sorry, Council President.
No, go ahead, Michael.
I was just going to say, we take that very seriously, so much so that we have specific cues in our 311 application that highlights to us, it's almost Pavlovian, how quickly we can react. So one is a knockdown cue. It's very basic nomenclature that helps us identify emergency issues. We have a set of emergencies that we respond to immediately: open cabinet doors, stray voltage, major system failures, which is 4 lights or more on a given street. And so those, unless I'm forgetting one, I don't think I am, are the bulk of our issues for emergency response. Anytime we see a leaning pole, we're out there immediately. We've refined it to where, assuming that the base is in proper condition to be reused, and it most times is, we'll replace on site. So it's our goal to actually have light and not go a night without having light in that location.
How many bridges do we have in the city that Boston's responsible for?
40.
How many?
40.
40, okay. How many inspectors do we have that inspect bridges?
Or do you want to speak to the way that bridge inspections take place?
Thank you, Chief. So, Councillor, the way how bridges are inspected, it's a federally mandated requirement through the whole country, and the federal government relies on the state highway department, MassDOT, for them to do the bridge inspections. So, it is the state that does all the necessary inspections, and there's a variety of inspections. For example, if it's a movable bridge, there are mechanical inspections, underwater inspections. So it is the state that does the inspections. They produce a report, Councillor, every 2 years. If the bridge is in a fairly decent shape, and if it is in a more troublesome, it could be at a higher frequency. Sorry, can I speak?
Yeah, of course,
so,
of course.
So then it is the State Department of Transportation that has the legal responsibility of inspecting those bridges, and it is inspected to federal standards that is uniform for the whole country. After the inspection, the state produces a report called a bridge inspection report. That is what has all those nomenclatures of, it's like a patient report. They send that report to the city. We forward that report within a very reasonable time to our bridge consultants for them to make an assessment as to the health of the asset. And we take corrective action as needed. So that is the protocol, Councillor, which we have used consistently for the last 10, 20, 30 years.
Thank you. So the state will inspect the bridges, and then the state will let Public Works know if there's any deficiencies that they were able to notice. Is that correct?
That is correct, Councillor.
And when the state informs Boston that some of the bridges need work immediately or eventually they need work, what is the process?
Excellent. So the numbering system you alluded to earlier, Councillor, from 0 to 9. So when bridges hit about a 5, that is the time where we are of the opinion that something more than a Band-Aid needs to happen to the whole bridge. And again, Councillor, the key part is the whole bridge. So the North Washington Street Bridge is a bridge that hit below a 5 and it is under construction. Other bridges that was below a 5, let me give examples. The Dana Avenue Bridge in Hyde Park, went below a 5, we rebuilt that thing. Mass Ave over Com Ave in the Back Bay area, went below a 5, we rebuilt the whole thing. Alfred Street Bridge in East Boston. So these are examples, Councillor, where after some time, we see it's getting, systematically to a point where it is needed for us to do more corrective action in a massive way rather than just putting a Band-Aid. So hopefully that gives you some understanding as to our tracking system to keep track of this patient that has about 70 elements of that whole bridge, and some are more critical than others. For example, the equivalence of the heart to a human being is a bridge deck to a bridge. If the bridge deck goes, everyone sort of falls. So we have these subcategories of importance. So that is it's not super complicated, but it's a very thorough process for us to make an evaluation as to what do we do immediately or so forth.
Thank you, Para. So if we're informed by the state that a bridge needs immediate work due to its poor condition, what is our response in terms of how quickly will we get to that bridge and do the immediate repairs? Is that hours or is that days, or are we talking weeks or months?
Let me speak to that and then let Para fill in a little bit of detail, because I think there's some important distinctions about how the state performs their bridge inspections. Each individual element of the bridge is inspected and graded independently of one another, and so we talked about the 0 to 9 condition rating. There's also a deficiency rating, which is essentially looks at the severity of a deficiency, ranging from minor deficiencies at the low end. There are severe deficiencies. There are then what are called critical structural deficiencies, and then critical hazard deficiencies. Critical hazard deficiencies being the most severe and urgent, typically that represent an imminent risk of harm. So in addition to that, there is an urgency of repair rating that is assigned, and there are 3 levels given to that. At the lowest level is prioritize, the middle level is ASAP, and the most significant level is immediate. And so we look at the totality of all 3 of those ratings for the different elements that are in the bridge report. Were we to receive a bridge report of indicating, for example, a critical hazard deficiency that poses an imminent risk to life or safety, in all likelihood, our response would be to close the bridge immediately until we could conduct further analysis. For the kinds of condition ratings and deficiency and urgency ratings that sort of fit in the middle zone, what we typically will do is within, as Para said, a brief period of time, which is typically less than 48 hours, conduct our own internal review of the bridge report. Where there is nothing that is indicative in the report of there being a critical safety, imminent safety risk, we will work with our bridge contractors to evaluate the report in its entirety and come back to us with a series of recommended repairs and essentially a remediation plan. to accompany the report, which will then get worked through our bridge repair capital program. So it's a long way of saying that it's very much dependent on the specifics of what we find in the report, of exactly how we will respond and on what timeline. Things that are identified as a critical hazard to safety are addressed immediately and with appropriate urgency. But ultimately, with many of the bridges are complicated structures, and many of the things that may be identified that do not pose as and indicated as not posing a critical risk to safety require some planning to figure out the best approach to remediation, which is why we work with our engineering contractors to review the reports in tandem with us and to then make a series of recommendations.
I'll ask one more question, and then I'll ask my colleagues, I'll give it back to the chair for further questions. So I understand that when a bridge is in immediate need for repair, that work will be done immediately if it's urgent. But the light pole on the bridge that's in need of immediate repair due to being severe, a major deficiency, how quickly do we respond to deal with that light pole on the bridge to make sure it's safe, it's sound, it's structurally sound? Do we do that within hours, or do we wait? What is the response from the city if we know a light pole is in very bad shape?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, speaking generally here, any time we become aware of a light pole in the city, whether it's on a bridge or elsewhere, that is an imminent risk to public safety or is an imminent risk of failure, we will rectify that situation as quickly as we possibly can, and the precise nature of that response may vary a bit depending upon the location and the design of the specific structure. For most of our traditional streetlights that are on land, and even many of the ones that are on our bridges, the poles can be unbolted from a base and swapped out with new poles if there's a structural issue with the pole itself. We do have some bridges in the city that were engineered in such a way as to make that normal course of maintenance more difficult. But again, in a situation where we are aware of a imminent risk to public safety, we will find a way to make the area safe. That could involve blocking off access to certain areas if we do not have a way to repair the structure itself. It could involve cutting a pole if we do not have a way to safely remove the pole. But ultimately, our response and the urgency of that is dictated by what we know about the level of risk and whether or not there is a hazard deemed critical to public safety. And that's our response is dictated from that. But as Mike said, we are prepared to respond often within minutes, but always within hours to any situation that requires that level of urgent action.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that, because we would never leave, I mean, I know we wouldn't, but we would never leave a pole up that's in very bad shape that could potentially fall down. We would deal with that within hours, wouldn't we?
In a situation where something was identified as being an imminent risk to public safety, that is correct. Okay.
No further questions at this time, Madam Chair.
Thank you, President Flynn. Councilor Flaherty?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so similar lines of questioning, I think we have field staff that's out there just performing their everyday, sort of, and every evening normal functions. And when they're out there, if they see something, clearly that would trigger some type of maybe a work order. Folks have the ability to call 311 and get a ticket number. Residents call their city councils, and then city councils reach out to you guys and your teams to address issues. And then I guess I'm trying to gauge, maybe the level of the priority on it and or the time allotment that it takes to get something repaired. And then same line of questioning, because obviously we're the host and we do have relationships and partnerships with the state and the federal government, but really more DCR. Sometimes a constituent, will call and they don't differentiate between sort of a state DCR, road versus a city road. They hit a massive pothole or they see a street sign down, they'll call their local, it could be their city council or their state representative. But sometimes in behind the scenes, you kind of get well, that's not us, that's them, and him, them, she, so it's one of those, it's like, and making sure it doesn't fall into the abyss of like, they call, we went out there, it's not us. And then I guess the question is like, so then how do we, deal with, I guess, another agency and say, hey, we went out there, we inspected it, it's actually yours. And then, like, I want to get a sense as to kind of how that works, because at the end of the day, the constituent, the resident, they don't care whether it's a city road or a state road, they just want the problem solved. And then if behind the scenes it doesn't get addressed, or we go out first, city council Flaherty calls you, you went out there, you inspected it, you saw the situation, you realized it wasn't ours, you make the phone call to, say, the state, and then it's like, they don't have, they may not be as diligent maybe as we are. They don't have a sort of a 311 tracking system. So a week goes by, 2 weeks go by. That person thinks that I dropped the ball. I'm thinking that you dropped the ball. We're now at each other at a public hearing saying, who done it? And then it doesn't necessarily fall. So maybe for everyone's edification, you can maybe those types of situations where our folks are out there, they see a situation and they address it in sort of the ticket in terms of how long that gets addressed. And then we get out there and we realize, wow, this is actually a serious issue, but it's not us, it's somebody else. And I think the chief had referenced 40 bridges. I happen to think there's got to be more than 40 bridges in the city so the 40 bridges, those are our bridges,
yeah.
but there are other bridges.
There are many more bridges that are responsible.
State and Amtrak,
MBTA, DCR,
okay.
yeah,
So there's do we know how many, Boston is home to how many bridges?
I am ashamed not to know that as a councillor.
Homework assignment.
Yes,
good quiz.
But councillor, if I...
Because I'm sitting there and saying 40, I'm like, there's no way. I'm counting them in my head. I'm like, there's more than 40 bridges.
There's a lot more than, and councillor, just to clarify, so bridges owned by the city of Boston, there are two families. There's the Public Works Department and the Parks Department. They own a couple of little arch near the Franklin Park, okay? So that's, but there's still a lot. But councillor, if I may take this opportunity to make like a tangential thing, this cross-agency cooperation, just within the last 24 hours, while we were inspecting a staircase, again, an asset that sometimes have seen better days, we came across a street light pole that was in need of attention. And we came to the conclusion that the light doesn't belong to us. So our amazing street light folks, not only did they take on the responsibility of managing the situation, they immediately contacted the MBTA, who was the pole owner, and made sure that it doesn't again fall through the cracks. So we have nurtured these relationships, councillor, with our sister agencies. Mass DOT is a very stable. MBTA, there's a bit of a turnover, so it is an ongoing challenge to keep track of the right people. And with DCR, similar. But we take this stuff seriously because when something hiccups, none of us are having a good day.
So the interagency relationships are there, the point of contacts are there, the government affairs or community relations folks are.
They're there, and I would say what we attempt to do is a sort of belt and suspenders approach, because as you kind of hit the nail on the head, which if I was to sort of evaluate our ability within the streets cabinet to be responsive, when somebody identifies a specific problem that is a specific person's job to fix, and that gets to that person, it gets done, and we track that stuff. We are extraordinarily responsive. Where things sometimes produce a less than ideal constituent experience is exactly what you just described, where something ends up with the wrong team, it ends up in the wrong queue, it ends up with the wrong agency. And I mean, I have a few maps that I keep around of areas that have a lot of multiple jurisdictions at play, and it's almost comical. The map of the Arbor Way area. So 4 different agencies. This sidewalk belongs to this agency. This street belongs to this agency. The sidewalk on the other side is a whole other agency. And so we kind of we try to keep that information close at hand. And really at every level, from the 311 staff, which can often pinpoint and identify jurisdictional and responsibility issues and reroute things, all the way up to senior leadership. You know, I can pick up the phone and call senior staff at DCR, at MassDOT, at the MBTA, if something elevates to my level as like, oh, this is their thing. But at every level of our staff, we try to make sure that we're developing and maintaining strong peer connections so that Mike can pick up the phone and knows who's responsible for handling street lighting issues at Mass DOT. Prior to this winter, we actually convened, I think for the first time in recent history at least, all of the relevant state agencies that do plowing and snow management within the city limits of Boston. And we did a walkthrough of responsibilities, who was responsible for what bridges. We reviewed, to the council president's point about after action, we reviewed a list that we had kept from the previous winter about areas where we ran into jurisdictional problems, where constituents were saying to us, you know, why isn't the sidewalk on the Kelly Bridge cleared, right? And that was one that got flagged. And so we sat everybody down, we went through the list, we said, okay, who's clearing the sidewalk? And we wrote it down, and, you know, everybody kind of pinky swore that it would, you know, that we're in agreement about the areas of responsibility. So we try to do that from both the process we have, the relationships that we build, and then to really identify those places where things sometimes do fall through the cracks and bring everybody together to kind of work through those issues so that they don't reoccur.
Thank you, Chief. And I've been in those meetings where we weren't getting any answers, so we had to call every agency to the site and say, all right, whose is it?
Whose is
You know,
this? Yeah.
no, then it's like people looking at the shoes and looking at the sky. It's like, okay, but eventually, it obviously gets resolved. But I would have to say
Sometimes
that
you need lawyers going back into,
True.
you know, like old paper books to try to figure out the answer to that question.
Yeah.
But usually we
You're
can
right.
figure it out.
But also many times the city's like, we're the host, so we'll do it, we'll take care of it. So kudos to you and the team that they're out there and they say, you know what, it's technically not ours, but we're gonna do it just because, we're in the area, we're doing 3 of these 4 other things, and it's easy for us to grab it while we're there.
Sometimes
always
we
helpful.
can do that, and for simple maintenance tasks, that
Right,
is
that's what it is.
sometimes
Right.
doable. But I think, often what you see is the city, I can think of a street lighting issue in West Roxbury recently that got flagged for Mike, and he dispatched his crews. I think they were out there within an hour to look at the issue, determined it wasn't the city's responsibility, but made sure that the handoff happened in a way that was clean and there was clear accountability. So I think it is that, when we can actually fix the problem, but sometimes our job is just to make sure that it doesn't end up in the ether somewhere.
Right, just kidding. And then around storms, so I assume that there's maybe a heightened awareness for the employees, whether it's a snowstorm or it's a northeast or a potentially hurricane or heavy winds and rains, and with power lines down and trees down, that there's sort of maybe a heightened awareness that when you're out there performing your function, whether that's a snow removal or it's some other important public works or transportation function, that they're out there and they're sort of taking a look around as the wind's blowing and the snow's coming in and the rain's pouring and that type of stuff. Is the
Absolutely.
approach?
And that's a great segue to a point I wanted to build off the chiefs, is that at I'd call it the street level, every one of our employees is ready to respond. So there isn't, all of our employees know which is DCR or which is MBTA, but there's no hesitancy to go help out or stand by to make the area safe. We actually had an interesting one on the Brookline West Roxbury line just recently. We weren't sure if it was in city limits. And so that was another added complexity. We did determine it was the last pole on the West Roxbury Parkway, and so our inspector went out and made the area safe. And from there, what I do personally, and Joe and the staff in street lighting does as well, is follows that along. We used to close out the case because we notified DCR. We now keep it open and manage it until it's closed, until it's rectified, I should say.
And then so do we have any idea how many calls come in from, say, 311?
I'd have to get back to you on that.
General maintenance.
If you're talking about sort of other agency calls?
Yes.
I would say roughly 5 to 10 a week.
Interesting.
And so we know enough about the different jurisdictions that we can pivot pretty quickly. And as the chief and Par had mentioned, we have specific points of contact that we'll reach out to. And it's more than just an emergency response. It's kind of a best practices. If I see a leaning pole on Morton Street, we'll let the folks at MassDOT know.
Gotcha, okay. Very good. Thank you, Superintendent. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. I guess one question I have is, what's the feedback loop for us realizing that like a type of equipment or material we have just like doesn't seem to be as durable as we need it to be? Like things that we see that we're just replacing all the time, we're not getting the expected lasted life out of them, and sort of at what point does this experience of fixing things kind of turn into a collective decision like, hey, we might need to procure a better thing going forward? And I'll say like a very basic one that I've been thinking a lot about is those tactile pads for the ramps, because the insanity to me of the fact that we're installing them all over the city and then they get torn up in a way that catches people's wheelchairs and strollers. And then when I call, it's like, oh, well, maybe in 2 years we'll get that replaced. I mean, that just, to me, I'm literally like, no, can we like carve these things out of iron and then have them be here forever is kind of how I feel. So that's the specific one that I'm coming from, but I would love to hear how these things get looped back.
That is the softball I was waiting for. So as of.
I thought you was putting a plug in for rubber side.
Well, no, actually, so as of 2 weeks ago, our standard detail for tactile pads now calls for cast iron. So that is what you identified as something that we have identified as well, that the durability of the composite pads is not what we need it to be. One of the interesting ways in which our maintenance programs and our construction programs intersect is, as you know, we recently started a program of pilot program for clearing pedestrian ramps as part of our winter operations. And while that has been great for accessibility, it has been murder on the tactile pads because we now have bobcats driving up and down them during the winter. And so what we've realized is that not that it was great before we were doing that, but it is only going to exacerbate the lifespan issues associated with those pads. And despite the claims of many of the manufacturers, they are functionally not easily replaced. They're supposedly, you can unscrew them and put a new one on, but in practice that actually doesn't work well in many of the conditions because of other underlying problems that occur with those pads. So this is a perfect example of what you spoke about, of us having made a lot of investment, realized that there are some limitations to that, making a switch in our materials as a result of that. I think Mike probably has some examples of that from the street lighting space, and I'm sure Para has probably 20 different examples of that over the span of his career of how we've optimized our material selection.
Absolutely. I would say, generally speaking, as it relates to our underground infrastructure, any of our linear assets being the streetlight poles, by and large, they're extremely robust. What we have found is some of the legacy items in very sort of small instances. We have some wood decorative poles that are probably under 50 of them in the city. And so we realized that the wood is going to degrade over time. And those are out of circulation. We replaced them. There are a few that still remain, but anything that shows any issues of wear and tear is immediately replaced. And so for the large majority of our streetlight poles, things are in really good shape. I would venture over to, say, Beacon Hill and Bay Village and anywhere a gas light exists and tell you that the fixture itself is a challenge. And I think a lot of the residents can see that. Anytime a gas light is potentially tapped by automobile, it potentially breaks the glass. The mantles in the gas light are very brittle and very expensive. And so that's something from a maintenance standpoint. We think we might have found a solution, but it's a long lead item in terms of potential conversion to electric, because those are polycarbonate lenses. The mantles are 3D printed and it's LED. So it provides a really interesting opportunity for us and will help with some of those maintenance headaches. But I would say, by and large, those decorative fixtures specific to the gas lights have been a challenge.
Good, thank you.
Hi, the other side. You saw?
I put a timer on myself,
Okay.
so.
You know that ramp, the tactile ramp?
Yeah.
I remember as clear as day when Commissioner Spineto and I, just about 3 blocks from here, tried that very first yellow tactile plastic thing. And as the chief said, its usage, like who walks over the thing, has changed dramatically over the years because now we actually are managing the snow. But the point I want to get to, Councillor, it is just not achieving a state of good repair. If we don't do what we need to do to maintain that state of good repair, we're just kidding ourselves. So that feedback loop mechanism is always there with everything which we do, not just to keep that thing functioning as it was intended to, but Chief's an excellent example of us questioning, are we building the right thing for the right purpose? So there's a huge feedback mechanism that is in place to ensure that Boston gets the best product we can when we hit our 400th birthday. That's what I'm aiming for. Okay, so that's a long-winded way for me to say, yes, we believe in this and we take this stuff seriously because it is Boston.
Absolutely, and you know I'm very excited about the 400th part, and I agree. I was recently telling the chief that something should be fixed by then. So, Chief, did you have something else to say on that, or I had one more question, which was just what about like, are there types of calls that you guys get? I guess part of what I'm wondering is the like if the workforce goes out for one issue, but then sort of notices another issue. Like it seems to me like often that's a way to kind of speed up the observation frequency, right? Is if we're like actively looking at things that are ours but are different from what maybe sent a team to the call. So how systematized is that? How much is that just kind of, you know, some people look around them and some people don't? I don't know, I'm just sort of curious about that.
Great question, and yes, as they're out in the field, it comes probably a variety of scenarios, but the one I can think of most often is if they see something, they need to work to repair it, or bring in additional staff if there are multiple priorities to balance. Each one of our inspectors is equipped with a city-issued cell phone that has the 311 app on it, city worker specifically, and it's been received very well. And one of the functions that I really like within that is the ability to assign a case to a specific employee. Because then as a manager, you can look and see that you've given them 10 or 15 cases and see how they've managed that workload. We're expanding that further and going to issue iPads to all of our mechanics so that they in the field can open cases as needed and even potentially close cases as needed upon repairs that they find in the field. So it's not going to be a one-off trip to a given location. If they see something else that's going on, they're going to repair it. In fact, I happened to pass by a crew on Moreland Street the other day, and I saw an open access door in one of our Arietta fixtures. So I opened the case, I passed by them, let them know. Within about 10 minutes, they let me know that it was repaired.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is, you know, many of us suffer from the affliction of always being aware, a little too aware perhaps of the state of the infrastructure that we use and pass. I think, speaking for myself at least, my spouse is none too fond of how long it often takes us to get places in the city because I'm stopping to note or take pictures of things that need some attention. And I think that sense of care and of stewardship is something that affects or infects, depending upon how you think about it, much of our workforce, and that is a very good thing. You know, this is one of the wonderful things about working in the city in which you live is you have those opportunities every day to identify those things. And while not systematized, it ultimately is a important contributor to making sure that we do have eyes on the street and people who are looking at those little details and catching them and making sure they get reported. So.
No, absolutely. And yeah, it's something I always really appreciate about my staff is that I'll just see winging in on the weekend over text some issue that somebody's noticed, you know, and I think you're absolutely right, Chief, that that's sort of a congenital part of a lot of our city workers, which is an amazing thing. Okay, I think those are my questions for now, so I'll just see if my colleagues have any follow-up.
I'm gonna ask one question, and do we have public testimony?
Yeah, we have at least one public testimony.
Okay.
And then I'll also, is Melissa Sender with your team or here as a public member? Okay, great. So we've got two, I think, public testimony right now. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to respond also to to both the chair and to the chief on, the importance of these neighborhood issues, these quality of life issues, public safety issues. That's exactly why myself and Councilor Flaherty called this meeting, called this hearing, because as you know, and no detail is insignificant. Nothing is insignificant in this city. No small detail is insignificant, and certainly not when you're inspecting a bridge or a light pole. So we share the same commitment, and that's why we're here today, to make sure that we do everything we possibly can to provide the best city services, neighborhood services to our residents. And I know you're committed to that, and I know myself and Council Flaherty and the chair as well. Let me just ask one question. And I know we don't want to necessarily talk specifically about the incident at Moakley Bridge, but after that incident, there were inspections done on poles, and it was determined that 23 of them needed immediate repairs. Is that accurate? Or need to be replaced, rather?
I believe the number was 23 that we found some element of concern on, and therefore removed immediately after the incident.
Were not completely satisfactory. What were some of the reasons in terms of structural wise, why they were not satisfactory?
Mike, do you want to speak generally about the things that we look at when we're doing an inspection
Absolutely.
like that?
So when we're conducting an inspection of a streetlight pole, specifically a steel one, we're looking for any signs of significant rust or flaking, which tends to happen if it's proximate to the water. And if we see that there is too much degradation or enough concern, we'll remove the pole. And as the chief had mentioned earlier, the construction of a streetlight pole is such that it has a base plate, and there are 4 posts that a set of nuts fasten the pole down to. In instances where there's significant degradation, it can sometimes affect the base as well. And so we have to assess if those posts or bolts can be reused. And if they can't be, we then have to make an assessment about how to replace that base. And so, as the chief had mentioned, we looked very keenly at anything that showed any level of concern and removed what we felt we needed to.
Thank you, Superintendent. Maybe just one follow-up. For a light pole on a bridge, what would the lifespan be, or how long would that pole be able to stay up structurally, knowing that there's salt water and the cold air coming at it, as compared to a light pole just in a traditional neighborhood, not near the ocean, such as, just maybe in Dorchester, that's not kind of near the ocean. Is there a difference between the 2 light poles? The lifespan of the 2 light poles?
I would hesitate to comment only because of the variability of the locations and the elements that they are interacting with.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I mean, there are so many variables, from location, the nature of elements, exposure to the elements, the materials used, the quality of the manufacturing, the maintenance associated with a given pole. All of these things are potentially variables that it would be difficult to quantify a relative expected lifespan from one particular spot to another.
Thank you. And my final comment, as we go into the budget process, this is really the reason I wanted to call this hearing, and along with Council Flaherty. But we really need to know how much resources you need. If you need more personnel to do this work at Public Works, we want to help you. We want to support you. We want to provide the resources to make sure that city and neighborhood services are addressed across the city. We have the personnel to do it. We have the funds to do it. We have the resources to do it. That's why these issues are so critical. And I hope when we're at the budget process that you really come down with a major increase of your recommendation. If the mayor says 30% increase, say Flynn says 40%, because we want to make sure that we have the right resources to get the job done. So just want to ask you guys to give me an honest assessment when you come down to the city council and telling us what you need, because I really like to hear good and accurate, updated information, and because that's the information that's going to improve basic city services and neighborhood services. So again, thank you for being here. Thank you for the work you're doing. And especially thank you to the Public Works personnel that are out in the streets and neighborhoods 24 hours a day. So we see them out there, and we appreciate and respect the work they do for the residents of Boston. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great, thank you, Councilor Flynn. Councilor Flaherty?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Obviously, my questions were asked and answered, so I appreciate the Chief and Superintendent and City's Engineer. I will maybe just use it to ask one quick question. I believe we still have, we have an acting Transportation Commissioner. Is that fair to say?
Until Monday.
Oh, until Monday. Okay, so we're in the process of moving forward with now that the MBTA General Manager has been discovered, we can now focus on
one
the
thing
city's
at a time.
transit. Yeah, and I just recognize that only because in my tenure here, I'm the longest serving member of the council, the dean of the delegation in my 20th year, and I've never seen sort of an acting sort of go on as long as they have. So I think it sends a message to the entire department. It's a very critical department. Obviously, Brad's doing a great job, but when you don't have a permanent leader, or if an acting continues to kind of drag on it, it can potentially cause a rippling effect. So I want to make sure that there's attention to detail on that. It's an important function of our city. Lots of changes in that sector, and having someone with two hands on the wheel that's committed and is going to stay and not moving towards retirement, I think that's an important thing for our city. So appreciate the work that he's been doing. Happy to hear that we're sort of, we've identified, or at least moving forward with a permanent selection, whether it's him or it's someone else. I just think that the acting needs to be converted to permanent to send the message that we're moving forward in this leadership there that's going to take it to the next level.
We have an exceptionally qualified Charlestown resident who will be starting officially on Monday as our new Transportation Commissioner. I will not spoil our announcement of that here in this public forum, but I do look forward to introducing you to him shortly.
That'd be great, and look forward to meeting that individual and working with that person as we have with Brad and all of his predecessors. So thank you, Madam Chair. I want to take the opportunity to thank the Chief Superintendent and the City's Engineer, and for you for hosting, and for my colleague, Council President Flynn, for co-sponsoring. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty, and that's zip code and gender, Chief. You only need birthday to identify a unique individual, but we're glad to hear that there will be
I wouldn't put it on the record.
Exciting announcement to have in the future. No, but seriously, thank you, and thank you all for the work that you're doing day in and day out. Councilor Flynn, do you wanted to say one thing? Yes, so yes, I am going to public testimony. I just want to thank the panel, and so in a moment we'll go to that public testimony. Just so folks can get queued up, I'm going to go first to Melissa Sunder, who's here in person, and then I will go to, I've got Tom Reedy and Bonnie Donahue both on virtual, so I will do that. But thank you all so much. And yeah, and I have things to follow up. Westland Ave, I'm still. And Para, I'm going to come darken your door about Thorough Path, so just so you know.
We're ready.
Yeah, but thank you.
Would you like us to remain here for this?
I mean, I think if somebody could stay, that would be great, but you don't have to stay at the at the podium, whatever you want.
Okay, all right, we'll hang out here just if
Okay.
you need us.
So then, Melissa, do you want to come up and testify? So again, just reminding if you can state your name for the record, neighborhood or organization, whatever makes sense, and then, yeah, just try to keep it to a couple of minutes, and just so that we can get everybody in. But you have the floor. And just a sec, let me make sure that mic goes on. So, and if you can just definitely like kind of lean into it, because the thing is that the people who watch at home can't hear, even if we can hear if you don't do that. So,
Okay.
perfect.
Good afternoon. My name is Melissa. I'm not with any organization. I'm just a regular, degular, schmegular Boston girl. I begin my testimony here today with the words of poet, musician Nasir Jones, better known as Nas. The bridge is over, the bridge is over, they say. The bridge is over, the bridge is over. While this hearing seeks to address Boston's public infrastructure issues in general, I want to speak specifically on one bridge, the Long Island Bridge. Not Long Island in Suffolk County in the state of New York, but Long Island in Suffolk County in Boston, Massachusetts. In July 2022, the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court ruled in favor of the city of Boston in its legal battle with the city of Quincy to rebuild the Long Island Bridge. And speaking of Quincy, also known as Dorchester Jr., recall that Quincy native and U.S. Army Chief of Staff James McConville was part of building the Boston Hope Field Hospital in response to the 2020 COVID public health emergency. The Massachusetts National Guard obtained and transported PPE via the New England Patriots jet, go Pats, under armed guard after a federal agency stole the state's PPE order 4 times. Why can't the Massachusetts National Guard be deployed to address public infrastructure, repair and maintenance projects in Massachusetts? The hardworking folks of the city's public work department might welcome such collaboration that as the city of Boston can barely recruit candidates to fill many municipal employment vacancies. Prior to that Supreme Judicial Court ruling, the Boston Herald reported on January 14, 2022, that Massachusetts had received $1.1 billion, yes, billion with a B, $1.1 billion from the Biden administration to replace and repair 455 bridges in the Bay State over the next 5 years. Considering the president can barely walk up and down a set of stairs or dismount a non-moving bike without incident, this funding posed a concrete and practical means to prioritize rebuilding the Long Island Bridge. But why has the city not prioritized this bridge's repair? I'll tell you why. Obviously, rebuilding the Long Island Bridge will not magically and categorically solve the humanitarian crisis at Mass and Cass, but it would at least put a dent in the swaths of suffering, substance abuse, sanitation concerns, and sex trafficking that plague the area. And make no mistake, Mass and Cass reaches all quarters and corners of Boston. Repairing the Long Island Bridge would also allow public access to Long Island to enjoy the natural beauty and resources of what is technically a national recreational area. And apparently, through the inaction of Boston's municipal government on the Long Island Bridge issue, the subtle stirrings of socioeconomic apartheid continue to coalesce. The perceived permanent economic underclass doesn't need or deserve a recovery campus, emergency shelter, housing, and Boston residents and visitors alike certainly don't deserve access to Long Island. The bridge is over, but the implicit bias of the deservingness heuristic is ever looming and ever emanating in the city's response, or lack thereof, to the Mass and Cass crisis. I'm sure if Dennis Lehane sought access to Long Island for another installment of Shutter Island, the mayor and almost all city councilors would be overjoyed and jump at the opportunity to accommodate Mr. Lehane's access and use of Long Island. The bridge is over, but this issue is not over. I won't let it be over. I will continue to use public testimony opportunities to remind these electeds that Councilor Flaherty, who is not here, you are, sir, are an at-large city councilor for the entire city of Boston, not just the neighborhood of South Boston. And 2, to continue to allow the humanitarian crisis at Mass and Cass to ferment and fester is not only bad optics, but an indictment of the hypocrisy of the identities of people who consider themselves people of faith on this council. It doesn't matter how many photos you take with the Sisters of St. Joseph of Boston in this chamber. I'm grateful for the chance to speak on the issue of the Long Island Bridge, and I close again with a lyric by Nas. They say, the bridge is over. Nah, Boston is the strongest hood, but it's the weak cowards of local government that kill it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sender. Thank you for speaking. Next up, I've got Tom Reedy.
Thanks, Madam Chair, members of the council. Tom Reedy I live in the South Boston waterfront, and I apologize for the neighborhood focus on the comments I'm going to make here. I want to focus on the three bridges that support my neighborhood: the Moakley Bridge, the Summer Street Bridge, and the Reserve Channel. I appreciate the city's response to the tragedy that occurred in September of last year. They were immediately on site, did bridge inspections of all of the light poles on all of the bridges. And as the chief mentioned, 23 were taken down, 2 were previously taken down. So a total of 25 light poles were taken off of those bridges. And the Public Works Department did a phenomenal job temporarily installing lighting to prevent any kind of safety issue. That's kind of migrated to what I would describe as an interim solution, right? Without the final lighting solution being deployed. In other words, final in my mind would be light poles deployed, the right light poles deployed, and to fully replace the 25 that have been subsequently removed. So I just ask that as the priorities get kind of sequenced both in the budget and in day-to-day work, that the city attempt to try to prioritize whatever's remaining of those light poles so that we end up with the final solution on those 3 bridges, given warmer weather is approaching, more people are out walking about, and we clearly want to make sure that we don't have any safety concerns. With regard to bridges, I appreciate the feedback that Par and the team had with regard to bridge inspection and what the city does once it receives those inspection reports. The concern I have actually is with a bridge that's no longer used or isn't used currently, and that's the Northern Ave Bridge. And I only bring it up in this regard. In 2014 is when it was opened, and I guess I'd call it abandoned, right? I think we all know that it's kind of open and just sitting there waiting for the final solution, the implementation of the final solution to begin. The concern I have is that inspections are few and far between nowadays. It probably had an inspection a few years back when the actual, when the work was underway on the new design for that bridge. The worry bead, of course, is it's sitting there exposed to salt water, and it frankly could just fall into the channel. So I just ask the city as it thinks about work this year that they ensure that bridge is inspected and any temporary measures that need to be enacted to keep it from falling into the channel be taken. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom, and I never have to apologize for focusing on the neighborhood. I think Chief Yasha Hodge wants to say something. Yasha Franklin Hodge, sorry, Yasha, wants to say something in response. So go ahead.
Yeah, Tom, thank you very much for your comments, and we're always happy to follow up directly with you on any of this. Just on your first comment related to the Moakley Bridge, so there is the work to put a permanent replacement of the light poles that were removed is underway. There was some work done on an accelerated basis at the very end of last year in order to ensure that there was adequate lighting levels in combination with the temporary lighting system that you alluded to. A small number of the light poles were actually replaced last year. Because of the nature of this location and the design of the bridge, there's some significant concrete work required in order to install new lights at this location, and so that is anticipated for this year. It has been going through a bridge design and engineering process, so we will be moving ahead with that hopefully this spring, but it is our intention to get the bridge back to a condition in which it is properly lit with permanent fixtures as quickly as we possibly can, and that work is funded and already underway. As it relates to the Northern Ave Bridge, it's a longer conversation about the long-term future of that bridge, but the city does regularly inspect that bridge, most recently about a month ago. Certainly the condition of the bridge is poor, and so we are working through both short and long-term planning to ensure that it is remains safe, although it is obviously not a functional bridge. It does extend out over the water sheet, and we want to make sure that it remains in a safe condition. So that work is underway, but this is, I just want to reassure you that sort of both the short and long-term work are very much on our mind and very much active projects within the city.
Great.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief. Okay, and next up is Bonnie Donahue. We do have written testimony from Ms. Donahue and also some pictures, which I just want to let you know have been distributed to councilors, and I know myself and Councilor Flaherty and Councilor Flynn all looked at them. So I've got that in front of me right now. Ms. Donahue, you have the floor. Can you hear me? You'll have to unmute.
Sorry. There we go. Okay, yes, happened to the video.
Oh, there you are. Perfect.
Got it. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to read my remarks, but it's exactly the same as the remarks I submitted to you. My name is Bonnie Donahue. I live at a limited equity co-op for creative workers called the Artists Building at 200 Summer Street, which is located between South Station and the Convention Center. Resident parking on Summer Street is limited to 8 or 9 spaces on both sides of the A Street overpass bridge, which is adjacent to my building. I don't think that bridge has a name, so I call it the A Street overpass. A few years ago, the City of Boston engaged in a $14 million renovation of Summer Street in this area. The entire street and all the sidewalks were gutted and freshly installed. It included a bike lane within the widened sidewalk. For some unknown reason, and so far no one at City Hall will tell me why, and this is reminiscent of what Councilor Flaherty was talking about, where I kept getting sent from one office to the next to the next. I spent 3 hours at City Hall trying to find out the answers to this. But the engineers decided to install a 16-inch strip of undulating concrete, which I called corrugated concrete because it resembles corrugated steel, like it's got a 2-inch rise of waves. So that's between the curb and the barrier rail on the A Street overpass. The City of Boston Parking Office then decided to assign resident parking to the spaces adjacent to this series of barriers, creating an extremely dangerous condition for all residents whose only choice is to park in those spaces. On December 10th, a dry and sunny day, I returned home with groceries from Whole Foods at around 4. I went to the passenger side and stepped on the corrugated concrete strip to fetch 2 grocery bags, and then tried to navigate undulating sidewalk to go around the barrier rail to get to my front door, which is about 50 feet away. My foot got caught and I fell really hard, face first on the concrete, got a concussion and broke my teeth, my front teeth. I lost my front teeth. I was taken by ambulance to Tufts Medical Center where I received emergency room care and was admitted overnight. And accidents resulted in nearly $30,000 of dental treatment. I'm going tomorrow for giving them another $6,600. I put in a claim with the city because the accident was a direct result of a faulty pavement, but that was deliberately installed, not a faulty pavement that got old and broke over time. This is a brand new feature. Was installed by the city in the Summer Street renovation project, compounded by the fact that the City of Boston deemed the site suitable for residential parking. This was an accident waiting to happen, and the City of Boston failed to exercise due diligence in anticipating that this is a hazardous place for residents to park. In fact, there are only hazardous parking spaces. These are the only hazardous parking spaces on Summer Street. The metered spaces have no barriers between the car and the sidewalk. But meters aren't an option for residents because they're really expensive, $8 for 2 hours, and parking is not renewable after 2 hours. City of Boston denied my claim with a boilerplate letter that stated, our investigation indicates that the area in question was reasonably safe and convenient for travel as required by Mass General Law, blah, blah, blah. Additionally, we found insufficient evidence that the city had actual or constructive notice of the alleged hazard prior to the date of loss. The law office failed to address the claim. The city did not need notice of the hazard because they deliberately installed the hazard as part of their beautification plans for Summer Street. I believe the city falsely denied my claim because they are responsible for the accident, and I believe that they need to reconsider my claim. Sean Murphy, the consumer advocate columnist for the Boston Globe, wrote a column about the accident, which was the top trending story, to my surprise, on the March 6th digital edition and appeared in Inc. on March 7th. I put a link to the Sean Murphy column in this document, so anybody who has the document can see it if they haven't seen it. So I have a threefold interest in reporting this incident to the city councilors. This was my first city council meeting in the 40 years I've lived in Boston. First, I believe the city of Boston needs to take immediate steps to remedy this public health hazard. This could be accomplished easily by removing the corrugated concrete and just replace it with poured concrete with a flat footing. The barrier rail also needs to be dealt with. When people get out of their cars and they're confined to that narrow strip of concrete, the 20-inch high barrier rail is also a hazard. If we need a rail at all, it should be like 42 inches high so that it's, helps you to walk around to the other side, to the sidewalk. Second, I believe the city of Boston needs to honor my claim for the damages I suffered as a direct result of poor engineering decisions by the city. And third, the city of Boston must not treat its residents as second-class citizens. It must provide adequate and safe parking for residents as it does for visitors. The city employees contacted by Sean Murphy stated that they will improve safety on this bridge without jeopardizing residents' ability to park on Summer Street. Councilor Flynn assured me that he requested that the city correct this serious design flaw. He acknowledges it's extremely dangerous for residents to park there in its current condition. I've requested documentation of the request for repairs so I can keep following up on this, but I haven't gotten a copy of those yet. Thank you for your time regarding this critically serious and imminent public health hazard. I'm not going to be the last person that fell there. Anybody who has to, there's going to be more. And that hazard has been there since I think 2019 when they finished the beautification project. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bonnie, and thank you for that detailed set of testimony. It's definitely eye-opening for me, and the council's not usually in a position to comment on the legal front. I think you make a lot of really good points here, so thank you for sharing it with us. I think that with that we come to the end of public testimony. So with that, this hearing, again, I'll just remind you, if you're watching it later, you can send public testimony to ccc.csit@boston.gov. But this hearing of the Boston City Council's Committee on City Services and Innovation Technology is adjourned. Thank you all.